But don't mind me. I'm just sitting out here enjoying the freshness of nature, breathing in all the wonderful things the world has to offer, reminding me of how great of a weekend it was for NASCAR fans. Not only did we get to see the Xfinity cars race in the rain, something we always like to see, but more importantly, Chase Elliott, NASCAR's newest golden boy, the guy we've all been rooting for years now, waiting for him to finally break through. He finally got it done on one of the bigger stages in racing at Watkins Glen, a fan favorite track. We had a good race yesterday, a first-time winner. NASCAR fans all around the world seemed just delighted to go to sleep last night, knowing that their sport was in a good place for the first time in what feels like a long time. So I'm just out here trying to remember how great those feelings felt, while also trying to ignore some of the more disappointing developments around certain people in the sport. Ugh. You know what? I have to talk about it. I have to think about it. Can't stop. I'm glad that the sun is right there because this harsh lighting, this deep shadow we got here really perfectly encompasses how I'm feeling right now. So most of us by now have probably heard the news. Came out yesterday, Sunday evening apparently. Brian France was arrested for driving under the influence or driving while intoxicated. The DUI, the big D. This isn't a laughing matter, but it is extremely disappointing. Another D. So many Ds. Yeah, anyway, you know, NASCAR fans, it's no secret, NASCAR fans don't generally hold Brian France in high regard these days. A lot of people blame him for kind of the decline NASCAR's had the last 10 years or so. You know, I'm not the kind of guy who blames him. A lot of people blame him because he enacted the chase when he came in. He's, you know, the Gen 5, Gen 6 were all under his watch. I don't fault him for those because I think those are things that, you know, some people like, some people dislike. I can't define that as a reason to dislike him. I'm not a big fan of him, primarily because he hasn't done much in terms of being a leader lately. He doesn't say anything. I made a whole video last week about how NASCAR's leadership doesn't communicate. Not to mention, he hardly ever shows his face. He only goes to a few races a year, whereas, you know, a lot of other NASCAR officials, give him credit, usually are at the track. Not Brian France. He kind of hides. And he's also just had several weird public appearances. It's just, he's a polarizing figure, and most fans do not really like him. But the point of this video isn't to bash Brian France just for being Brian France. The point is to honestly bash him for making a big mistake. And, you know, a DUI, that's a mistake that, you know, a lot of people make. It's a very bad mistake, something you should not do. He also was charged with having a drug possession that he wasn't supposed to have, I guess. So all in all, this is a bad look for Brian France, a bad thing he did. I am in no way, shape, or form going to condone what he did. But the biggest problem I have with it, more than anything, is that it has now dragged NASCAR's name through the mud yet again at probably the worst possible time. I mean, literally, Sunday, just 2 days ago, NASCAR fans were having one of the greatest days of the season. It was a good race at Watkins Glen, won by none other than Chase Elliott, you know, NASCAR's newest young superstar that they've been trying to push. Big day, fans super excited, and Brian France goes out and makes this mistake. It's just carelessness is what it is. It's selfishness too. Because if Brian France knew he had a drug problem, knew he had some sort of problem, you know, he needs to get help, or he needs to be self-aware enough of that to maybe not continue to lead and be the face of the biggest racing league in America. I mean, if you know you have a problem, you know, that the most selfless thing to do would be to admit it and to not let it get in the way or hurt the sport you represent. But he didn't do that. He allowed it to hurt the sport. It's hurt the sport's value. You know, the rumor's been that, you know, Brian France and NASCAR are looking to sell. Now NASCAR's value has undoubtedly dropped. I'm sure there's some sponsors that might back out because of this. It's a bad day for NASCAR, and it sucks because it's coming out the heels of one of the best days. So even when something good happens during his time as NASCAR CEO, he still manages to mess it up. I don't know how he does it. He's really quite amazing. I don't have a whole lot else to say. I made some comments on Twitter. A lot of you guys have made comments on Twitter or on YouTube all over the place, so I think enough has been said about Brian France. If you're a person who doesn't really watch NASCAR and just happened to click on this video because you wanted to hear about Brian France, I want to let you know right now, most fans do not like Brian France as our CEO. We do not see him as the face of the sport. He does not necessarily represent the vast majority of NASCAR fans. So please, if you're one of those gotcha kind of people in the media or in the world, you know, please do not use this as an excuse to attack NASCAR fans. We've been through enough public scrutiny over the years that really we don't deserve, and I don't think we deserve this one at all. So please, keep us out of your mouth if you don't mind. That's all I want to say there. Back to the happy thoughts, right? Please. But back to the good part of this weekend, Chase Elliott winning. Wasn't that just great. I want to end the show talking a little bit about that, a little more of my thoughts after yesterday's race, because now I think I've had more time to digest it, and I've also wanted to point some things out. I want to talk about this. All season long, the conversation has been, how do we change NASCAR? How do we return NASCAR to the glory days of the early 2000s? All sorts of fans from all sorts of different backgrounds, ages, generations have given their opinion on that issue, including myself, whether it's changing the aero package or adding more short tracks or road courses to the schedule. There's been a ton of suggestions, but at the end of the day, it turns out I was right all along. Ever since the beginning, and I mean ever since the beginning of this season, I have videos from months ago saying this, I have been adamant that the biggest problem facing NASCAR was not the aero package, not any other rules changes, was not anything else, and really it was something out of their control. I think the biggest issue hurting ratings right now is the departure of big names like Jeff Gordon, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Carl Edwards, Tony Stewart, Matt Kenseth, and so on. I've consistently been saying that the biggest problem with NASCAR this year is that a lot of their superstars are gone. Jeff Gordon, Tony Stewart, Dale Earnhardt Jr. now, among several others, have all retired, and that in and itself is not a bad thing. Every sport sees their superstars retire. But the difference is, like when Michael Jordan retired from the NBA, LeBron James immediately showed up. Or when Alex Rodriguez or Barry Bonds retired from baseball, we have Mike Trout or Aaron Judge to fill their spots. The difference is that NASCAR has seen Jeff Gordon and Tony Stewart retire, greats of the sport, and their replacements to this point have not lived up to the expectations whatsoever. The last couple of years, young drivers have not been nearly as successful as the veterans. That's why Kevin Harvick, Kyle Busch, and Martin Truex Jr. are dominating this season. But in the last month, really since the beginning of July, there's been a little bit of a newfound energy around NASCAR. And I was trying to sit there and think why, because we've gone to some of the most boring racetracks. We've gone to Pocono, we've gone to Kentucky, which was a stinker of a race, and Loudon, tracks that a lot of fans don't really like. And all three of those races I just named were won by big three drivers that everyone's tired of, apparently. So I've been trying to figure out why are fans so in love with the last few weeks of racing, and it's obvious, especially when you look at this weekend's race at Watkins Glen. Fans are happy because some of these young drivers, new faces, are finally having some success. Eric Jones won at Daytona. People were thrilled by that. Daytona was a good race overall, but Eric Jones winning was the icing on the cake. That race at Chicagoland with that great finish, it was a great race overall. That one's maybe the exception. It was a great race regardless of who you're rooting for, but you know, at the end of the day, it was Kyle Larson, a young driver, really giving it to Kyle Busch, making things dramatic. And then of course Watkins Glen, which I said yesterday was an okay race, a pretty good race. It wasn't an amazing race like people are trying to sell it as, but the reason people feel great after that race is because Chase Elliott won. Ever since the race ended this weekend, I've had many comments on my videos as well as several tweets aimed in my direction that have been calling this race at Watkins Glen the greatest race of the season. And it was a good race, don't get me wrong, but the only reason people are saying that is because of who won. I want to look at some statistics from this race at Watkins Glen. 83 out of the 90 laps were led by only 2 drivers. The final third of the race, that huge final third of the race, went completely caution-free. Hardly anybody could still pass. Truex was one of the only guys that could pass, and he was quick to call out how bad the aero package was. The top 4 was exactly the same for almost the entire final 30 or 40 laps. Elliott, Truex, Jones, and Suarez. And at the end of the race, third place was more than 20 seconds behind the leader. Kyle Busch would have been a lap down at some tracks. But yet people are saying this was a great race. And why is that? It's purely because of who was standing in victory lane. If this race had played out exactly the same, except we replaced Chase Elliott with Kevin Harvick, people would be saying this was a very average race. And I know that for a fact, I've seen it. After that great race that most everyone agreed was a great race at Chicagoland a few weeks ago, I saw tons of comments from people who really didn't enjoy that race purely because Kyle Busch won. And I'm not just trying to infer that, I mean, they legit told me they didn't like the race because Kyle Busch won. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with liking a race more or disliking a race more because of how your favorite driver did. I mean, Lord knows, most of my favorite races are ones Matt Kenseth won, but you know, even though a lot of those races at the end of the day were kind of boring. So there's nothing wrong with it, but I just want to point it out because then when people try to tell me that, oh, the biggest things that need to change in NASCAR, the aero package or the schedule, I'm like, I don't think so. And this week's race at Watkins Glen proves it. The aero package still sucked. This track's a fast road course. Aero still matter. That's why Truex couldn't pass Chase Elliott. But here we are 2 days later and nobody's complaining about the aero package. Nope. Everyone's just celebrating the fact that Chase Elliott won. So like I've said all along, the aero package, schedule, all those other things, they should still change because they could definitely be improved. But NASCAR is not failing. Because at the end of the day, like we've seen the last few weeks, Eric Jones, Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, Daniel Suarez, some of these other guys, Byron, these young drivers that we have so much potential for, that have so much potential, these young guys will eventually start to succeed. And when they do, fans will love it, and fans will be really excited, and fans will be kind of uplifted and kind of rejuvenated about NASCAR once again. And I hate to say it, it really doesn't matter if NASCAR changes the aero package or not, it really doesn't. I hope they do. I hope you're not watching this NASCAR and thinking that the aero package needs to stay the same. I hope you're not taking that from it. You should change the aero package. But my point is, and I've been saying it all along, is that driver star power is what's going to drive the sport forward. for lack of a better word. Entertainment in the world these days is driven by names. Doesn't really matter what you're doing, but if there's a name attached, it's a big deal. And NASCAR right now is lacking names, but as guys like Chase Elliott start to win more, as we've seen this weekend, people will notice, and NASCAR will be just fine. But anyway, that's all I have. I didn't want this to be like an I told you so, and I really hope it doesn't come across that way. I just wanted to make this to kind of remind you guys that, hey, NASCAR's gonna be all right. As soon as some of these young guys start winning finally, fans are gonna be happy. So let's just give it some time. There's a lot to be excited for if you're a NASCAR fan these days, if you ask me. So let's try to remember that. Thanks everyone for watching. Thank you, of course, to our wonderful Patreon sponsors of the show. I'll be back later this week. Follow all those links down below. Go check them out. Thank you for watching. This has been Out of the Groove on the Road. I'll see you guys again pretty soon.